Okay, it seems that the Badger Cull has finally started. And for those of you that don't know what it basically means the killing of 70% of the badger population across areas of Somerset and Gloucestershire as a kind of pilot to see whether it actually makes any effect on the spreading of bovine TB to cattle. And if so, they're going to roll it out over the whole country, i.e. exterminate 70% of the badgers across the whole of the UK. Although how they actually ensure that only 70% of the badgers are killed and not more is a mystery to me. I mean, basically the people who support the cull seem to basically really want to kill all the badgers in the UK, certainly all the badgers in England. And the 70% thing, is there as a kind of sop to those people who are opposed to it. But what they really want is to kill all the badgers. And obviously, it's I think a tactic of the government to have left the start of the cull till this week, so that they could leave it until some major news item, i.e. the events in Syria breaks, so they can bury news of the Badger Cull, underneath other bad news. It's a well-known media tactic. And that's what the government is up to, and it seems to have kind of worked. Apart from one news item on the TV news on I think it was Tuesday evening, we've heard nothing about the Badger Cull, and there's been very little about the cull in the newspapers. And if it has, it's been buried within the middle, because the newspapers have been dominated by Syria and the parliamentary vote. And of course, the government has left it and waited for a major news item like that to occur, so they can kind of hopefully get people to forget about the Badger Cull. Well, I don't think people should forget that the Badger Cull has started, and I think people should oppose it. And why do I think people should be opposed to the Badger Cull? Well, exterminating wild animals from the countryside is something that surely should only happen in extreme circumstances. I mean, if the badgers were spreading, or could be proven to be spreading some disease which is lethal to human beings, like they were infected with rabies, or it could be proven that they were spreading bovine TB, and it was a disease that could be spread to humans and prove fatal, then to me there is a case for a cull. But the problem with the Badger Cull is that bovine TB is pretty much harmless to humans. If you eat beef where the cow has had bovine TB, apparently it doesn't actually do anything to you. So, it's not a disease that is lethal to humans. And also, there is no proof that badgers spreading bovine TB is the major reason why the disease is spreading and why so many cattle are getting it. There have been sort of other studies and other cull attempts going right back to the early 1970s, and none of them have proven a clear case for badgers being the major reason why bovine TB is spreading. So clearly what the government is doing is trying to engineer a situation where a link is proven, so they can have a case for exterminating all the badgers from the countryside. And why are they so keen to do it if there's no proven link or no proven case for it being the major cause of bovine TB? The answer is the government wants to do it because it's an easy sop to throw to the farmers. And I say that because the real issue is that it is perfectly possible now to vaccinate cattle against bovine TB and thus solve the problem that way. The reason why the government isn't vaccinating cattle isn't actually primarily the cost. It's because the European Union won't allow it. It goes against EU bureaucratic rules. The argument being something along the lines of, if you vaccinate the cows against bovine TB, then it then makes it somehow harder to do a skin test to prove whether the cattle have contracted the disease in the first place, or something along those lines. It's some technicality within the European Union's regulations. And of course, what the government is worried about at the moment is the people in rural communities voting for UKIP. So because they're so obsessed with farmers not voting UKIP, they have to throw them a sop. And the sop they're throwing them is, oh well, you want us to kill all the badgers, so let's kill all the badgers. And it's as simple as that. Another problem is that farmers, particularly dairy farmers, are finding it incredibly difficult to survive at the moment because of a whole string of reasons. But the main one being supermarkets keep forcing down the prices. And that affects farmers in general, not just dairy farmers. But it's a particular problem with milk. The supermarkets want cheap milk, cheap meat, cheap beef, cheap pork, cheap lamb, etc., and keep forcing down the prices. And that is really endangering dairy farmers in the UK. And combined with cheap foreign imports of cheap meat, cheap food and so on, many farmers are on the edge, absolutely on the edge. And in that situation, the last thing they want is their cows getting bovine TB as well. So you can understand to an extent why the farmers are so determined that something should be done. The problem is, what the government will not do is tackle the core issues. They will not deal with the issue of the supermarkets because they're basically in hock to big business. The big supermarket, Tesco's, Asda, Sainsbury's. Basically, they pull the string of the politicians. And the politicians are scared to actually take on the supermarket. So they're not going to help the farmers by doing the most important thing they need to do. Nor are they going to deal with the issue of cheap milk and food coming in from abroad because they think the public like cheap food. And the public do like cheap food. Any cheap muck they can get their hands on, that's reality. So because the government won't actually deal with any of the real pressures on farmers, they have to throw them a sop. And the sop they are throwing them is the Badger Cull. Now, you might be watching this in a rural area, or you might be a farmer watching this, and you might be thinking, these people, like this bloke on this video, they do not understand rural issues. They do not understand the pressures that we are under as farmers, and why, how awful it is when our cows get bovine TB. We've got to kill the badgers, it's a necessity. Well, yes, okay, you might think like that, but what I'll say to you is, if you're a farmer, is you might be getting the Badger Cull out of the government. You won't get anything else. They're giving you this so they don't have to give you anything else. So, don't expect them to do anything about the supermarkets. Don't expect them to do anything about the financial pressures you're facing due to competition from cheap imports. They won't. And if you basically swallow this sop, instead of keep lobbying on the real issues, then nothing will change. What's more, I'll say this to you if you're a farmer watching this. Think about how this plays with the public. I mean, without being brutal, the general public's image that they have of farmers, to be honest, amongst a lot of people, is of some kind of inbred yokel who delights in inflicting cruelty on animals. And by so enthusiastically supporting the extermination of badgers, you aren't doing anything to actually change that public perception, however inaccurate it may be in the first place. In fact, I think you're reinforcing it. So, you might be thinking, well, why don't the general public buy British meat? Why don't the public support the farmers? Well, the way you are carrying on over the Badger Cull is far more likely to antagonise the general public and make them totally unsympathetic to the farmers than anything else. Because frankly, the public are opposed to this. They do not like the idea of exterminating our wildlife. They do not like the idea that this policy has no democratic mandate whatsoever, and yet is being forced through by a bunch of cowardly politicians who basically are doing it purely so that they can toss the farming community a sop rather than actually deal with the real financial pressures that farmers face. And it's just a shame that as a result of all these policies, the badgers and the countryside has to pay the price. And what I would urge people to do who are opposed to the Badger Cull is to keep the pressure on and keep campaigning. Legally, of course, but to use legal methods to keep campaigning, keep the pressure on. There's a big campaign against it led by or supported by a number of high profile people like Sir David Attenborough, like Brian May, the guitarist with Queen. Brian May's got a song up on YouTube and on iTunes at the moment called Save the Badger, Badger, Badger. Buy the song. Go on the teambadger.org website where you can find lots of information. Sign the e-petitions, but keep the pressure on the politicians. Because if you don't, then basically there will be no badgers left in England. They will exterminate them all. I mean, don't expect it to stay at 70%. How can they measure that? They will, there might be a few left, but they will exterminate the vast majority of badgers from our countryside unless you, the public, keep the pressure on. Thanks for listening.